My name is Angelina Avedano, and this is Interspace, where we explore the spaces between us. Join me for discussions on a series of realities with thinkers, writers, thought leaders, and artists. Through Dragonfly Coaching LLC, Dr. Lisa DeAngelis helps leaders at all levels move from knowledge to wisdom to action. Lisa has published several peer-reviewed articles on leadership, teamwork, and transformation. She has more than 20 years of divisional and corporate leadership experience with companies of all sizes in diverse industries. This experience serves as a strong platform for her current work. Following her passion, Dr. DeAngelis helps professionals at all levels connect with their own capabilities and enjoys seeing, quote, the light bulb go off when they begin to recognize their potential. Welcome, Dr. Lisa DeAngelis. Hi, Lisa. I am so happy to get to spend time with you today and have this conversation that I've been looking forward to. So welcome to Interspace.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah. I wanted to first start by saying how we met, that we have spent some time in a women's writing group, a circle that I know both of us have found incredibly supportive. So I just wanted to start by talking about how we feel about a community of writers and how much that has helped us in our own work and how valuable it is, because I feel so fortunate to have you as a mentor and a support for my own work. And so I just wanted to open it up with that.
I think that's a beautiful opening. I am struck by the power of a supportive community. Whatever the purpose is of that, for us, it started off as a writing community, as an ability for each of us to find space and to have the resources we needed to be able to finish our PhD, start our books, things like that. But I see so many of these groups where a collective of individuals come together with the sole mission of supporting one another's journey. And it's critically important, right? None of us gets through this life alone. And I think we forget that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I also think there was something really special for this particular group that we're talking about. It was a group of women. And I don't think that excludes men, because I have incredible mentors, men who are mentors and champions of my writing. But there was something very magical about a group of women over a weekend or 3 or 4 days, and who would come and go, and just that open space, which became something very, I would say, sacred.
I think that's a perfect word for it. I think at different points in the process, each of us was at a different place, and we were able to honor that for one another. Whether that meant that we showed up and just went head down for 72 hours and really didn't speak to anyone much at all, or whether that meant taking a long walk with someone because they just needed to sort through what was going on in their head. So, to have that community that could meet each of us where we were and figure out how to support in that moment with what was needed, truly sacred.
Yeah, and I don't know how you can't, it seems like you can't train people, you can't teach people how to do that. That's just something that sort of happened organically, and it was a wonderful miracle for my own process.
Well, and if you think about it, we had people who came in and didn't stay. Mm-hmm. Right. So for them, it wasn't the right space. It wasn't the right configuration of support or people. And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. Right. It's important for them to know that this community exists and that they can create the community that will work for them.
Yeah, that's so true. And you are so much about collaboration and community, I know, in the work that you do, and have been such a leader and a mentor for me personally. But in communities all around the world and locally in the Boston area at the Center for Collaborative Leadership. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you incorporate that sort of mentality into your professional life as well?
Sure. Yeah. I think you're right. It is part of my DNA to figure out how to bring people together who can help each other get to the next leg of the journey, right? It doesn't have to be, you and I have talked, I use language like the tribe versus local guides. And, the tribe are the folks like you for me, someone who I plan on having in my life for my lifetime. And am so honored to have that because you're invested in who I'm becoming. And it's about who I choose to become, not about your vision of who I should be. That's so magical. Then you have local guides who are just the folks who are there to get you to the next leg of the journey, right? So for me, this could be someone like when I first started Dragonfly and I needed a website. Goodness knows I am not a techie, right? So I found someone who could help me design and build a website. Now, once the website was done, we parted ways. But it's finding those people when you need them and how you need them in your life, which I've done all along, right? The Emerging Leaders Program at the center is just being able to create the container that allows this community to see the potential in one another and to actually grow into it. And even when I do one-on-one coaching, I am always talking about who's on the team, right? Who else do we need to have on board? Who else do we need to have involved? What do they understand about where you're heading and why? So it really is, no matter how many times I say it, we don't go through this journey alone. Mm-hmm. And we certainly don't maximize the journey if we try.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, often we are led to believe that our success is our success. I did this. I'm a self-made blah, 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 right? And what I find is that those folks who do it alone, who try and do it alone, it's a smaller stage that they end up playing on than is possible for them because they're only focused on their own resources. Right? And there's a saying that says, it's hard for us to see our own eyelashes because they are so close. We don't see our own gifts, right? How many conversations have you and I've had where you've been able to say something to me and I've gone, oh, hadn't thought about that, right? Hadn't seen that. Don't take that as a gift that I have because I assume everybody thinks the same way that I do. So the ability to have other people around you who can serve in different purposes, whether it's to hold up the mirror or to cheer you on or to give you a swift kick in the butt when you need it, right? That's the gift that a community gives to you that you don't get if you try and do it all on your own.
Yeah, I so have to agree. And you have given me more than one swift kick, I have to say. And I want to talk about that specifically because there was just this moment where I felt like such a jolt of reality by something that you said. And it was really all hinged on this idea of self-limiting beliefs. And so I want to talk about self-limiting beliefs because for me, as you've helped me so much to kind of open up my, become aware of how my internal talk, my dialogue, the way that I define the world and myself in it really is going to affect what happens.
The impact you can have.
Yes.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right? And this isn't... self-limiting beliefs aren't something that, they aren't something that we have ever really talked about, right? I think this is new language for us to be able to really start thinking about and becoming aware of and unpacking the stories that we tell ourselves. And those stories could have come from anywhere. This could have been a teacher that you had in the 3rd grade who told you that you weren't good at math. And so now all of a sudden, you're never going to be a CEO because you're not good at math? Really? right? And so that's the stuff that we don't even realize we're telling ourselves, and yet it colors everything we do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that over the time that we've worked together and you've helped me to look at that, I have become more and more aware of just the constant chatter. And just this constant chatter. How do you, I know in your one-on-one work with coaching, how do you help people to like unpack that and to intercept it?
And I think that's a good way to say it, right? Because usually what will happen is they will say something and I'll say, okay, hold on. Can you just repeat that sentence? So that they actually hear themselves saying it. Because most of the time, I hate to say we're on autopilot, but language becomes ingrained and we just stop thinking about it. Mm. And so, you know, whether it is someone who says, well, I'll give you one of my own, which you helped me to unpack. When I first started this PhD program, the internal voice I had was that I wasn't a good writer. Because every paper I turned in during the curriculum portion of the PhD got great critique. Because I don't naturally think and write academically. Right? I think and write with the user in mind, with the reader in mind. And so you and Deanna were the ones who helped me see that there's a different way of writing in a PhD program. And so it's not a matter of me not being a good writer, right? Mm-hmm. And continuing to reinforce that in my brain. Mm-hmm. There's a different version of writing that's needed here. And can I learn that? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But it's a learning process. Mm-hmm. And so it's those tweaks, right? It's acknowledging those tweaks. I was speaking with a coaching client a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying that, you know, she doesn't have a voice in meetings. And I said, hold on, right? Let's unpack that. Where is that coming from? And how can you choose differently? And so some of the things that we talked about are easy things, like she has a peer who's in these same meetings and saying to that peer, if you see me looking like I have an idea and not finding a way to jump into the conversation, can you say, hey, wait, I think so-and-so has something they want to say? Or inviting them into the dialogue so that they start to gain confidence that they can actually have an important voice in the room, that voice is needed in the room. They wouldn't have asked you to be in the room if they didn't want you to contribute.
I want to talk about your work because in your writing of your dissertation, it's teaching for transformation. You talk about transformative teaching and learning. And so for those who are listening who may have no idea what that is about, could you just give us a baseline? I know there's a lot of literature or some literature about teaching transformatively, learning transformatively. Could you just help us to understand what you're talking about and then where you're taking it?
Sure. I would love to do that. So this actually for me, this is such a great honoring of the transformative teachers that I've had in my life along the way. And we've all had them, right? These are the folks that we can recall, whether they were formal teachers or coaches or mentors, whose impact on us has lived long beyond the time we spent with them. And so for me, the first one that I ever had was my 4th grade teacher. And I remember we had just moved to a new town. And we'd moved over the summer, so we were all getting our course assignments for the fall. And all of my neighbors kept saying, whatever you do, don't get this teacher. He's so hard. Don't get him. He's mean. Guess who I got?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I go crying to my mother and I'm like, please go into the school and get me a different teacher. And she said, I'll make a deal with you. If you go through the first month and you decide that this is not the class for you, then I will go into the school and I will advocate for you. But you have to figure this out for yourself. To this day, first of all, I'm still in contact with my 4th grade teacher, but he's still one of my favorite teachers. Because he was all about encouraging us to see ourselves and the world around us differently. And was he challenging? Absolutely. But in the best way. I learned more about how to learn and about how to trust myself to learn in that class than I have since then. Right? And so my reason for doing this is that I don't want that to be such an anomaly. Right? I want folks to be able to experience that and to be able to create that container if that's what they choose to do. Right? And teaching that way is nothing short of a full body experience, so not every teacher wants to do that, and that's okay.
You know what is so interesting about that is that moment and that teaching and that experience and that kind of learning, that transformative experience, brings you where you are today. You know,
Absolutely.
that 4th grade moment. And I had
Absolutely.
a similar moment with it was actually a college professor who said to me, what are you doing? You need to be doing this. Not because she was trying to direct me with her own, project on me, but because she saw in me the truth that I couldn't see for myself. And she just said that, like almost slapping me and saying, what are you doing? You need to be looking at both English and religion. You need to be, and she saw the academic in me and I was like, oh, wow, maybe there's some truth to that. And that's what brings me here today with you.
It's amazing, right? And it's those flashpoints. And it's creating that container. Right. And so the work I'm doing in teaching for transformation, it's interesting that you talked about the fact that there's literature out there about transformative teaching and literature about transformative learning. There's actually far more literature about transformative learning than there is about transformative teaching. And what's written about transformative teaching is primarily anecdotal. So I, as the teacher, am going to tell you what I think was transformative about how I taught.
Oh.
That's most of the literature right now that exists in this space. And so what I'm trying to do is say, based on research, based on watching the classroom, here's how you can begin to build a transformative experience. Right? And you may decide that you want to be a transformative teacher. That does not mean that the student is ready to be transformed. All you can do is create the conditions.
And even then, you can try to create the conditions, but there are so many variables. There are so many variables, as a professor, and I know that you have been in that role as well. You can have things set up a certain way, but you get in a room, there's a dynamic that is there. The individuals in the room create a very specific dynamic. I would venture to say now in the virtual space that creates yet another dynamic of having to engage with students at a level that perhaps you weren't planning on. And there's an energy that happens in the room that you don't have control over. And I have taught the exact same class at different times of the day, but the exact same material gone from one room to the next in college class to teach the same material, and one class would be all about it and the next would have none of it. And so there's a really interesting complexity about all the things that come together to create that environment.
Absolutely, right? And what am I lending to that experience? Right? So there have been times where folks that I have coached will walk into a group and say, I've got 2 divisions. I've got two divisions that I work with. One division, rock solid. They are doing what they need to do. The other division, like, can't get out of their own way. And as we start to unpack it, there are the stories that they've told themselves because of some experiences that they've had about this other group that now continue to color that group, whether they're true still or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be anything. You know, this can be, this supervisor of the group reminds me of a supervisor that I had before. Right? So it's not even that human being.
Mm-hmm.
It's a residual effect that is now coloring your relationship with that human being.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you become aware of that and acknowledge it so that you can move through it and past it?
What's so interesting to me is that this is the very process of, our own personal growth writ large, right? It happens now in a group. And that is really fascinating. These are the same principles of awareness and being, just being cognizant of what is informing the way you interact, how you see yourself, and how that engagement happens. And this is what you're teaching, or what you've also written about.
And what I will hopefully continue to write about, because, one of the criteria of being a transformative teacher is to be on your own transformative learning journey. You've got to be able to demonstrate for these students that this journey is safe and okay. Right? You will come out the other side. I'm not sending you into treacherous terrain without having been there myself. Right? And so that I think is so important and is so very different from the model of teaching that is sage on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm the expert. I have all of the experience. You are empty vessels, and I am going to fill your brains with my learnings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It's such a richer experience when we learn from each other.
Yeah. It also requires an incredible amount of vulnerability, and that's very scary.
Yep. Absolutely. Right. And this is why I put the disclaimer on the front end of this. Not everyone wants to be a transformative teacher, and that's okay. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you do, then right. It is going to take self-awareness. It's going to take humility. It's going to take vulnerability in order to be able to be in the ring with your students on their behalf.
How do we ready ourselves, or even convince ourselves, in a world that has told us that we really need to armor up, be, kind of warriors in business, or, in our professional lives? We need to have this mentality that is strong and will succeed. How do we come to terms with the fact that, honestly, what is needed is a complete exposure and vulnerability, because those seems to be at loggerheads?
Less so now. I really think that we are cracking that armor. And I give kudos to Brene Brown for all of the work that she is doing to raise awareness around this. And I think the reality is that the leaders that we look up to, the leaders that we resonate with, are the leaders who have shown us their humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's remembering that. It's really saying, when I think about the impact I want to have on my world, whatever that world may be, right? That world may be my family unit.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the impact I want to have? The impact only comes from engagement. Right? You can't stay separate, contained, and hidden behind armor and have true impact. True positive impact.
One of the things that came up around that with some of the educators that you were studying and observing their conversations and having conversations with was that when you have become so vulnerable and modeled this with your students, then there are these occasions that come up where you need them to be afraid of you a little bit so that you can, like, I don't know. I just found that to be kind of a funny thing, and it resonated with me. Let's talk about that a little bit. Do we really need fear?
So I think it's not so much fear as respect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I do think that there is that fine line of, I am the teacher, you are the student. There is a infrastructure in the classroom. There's a hierarchy in the classroom that you don't necessarily break down completely. So, and there are ways that you can do this physically in the way you set up the space, right? Physically in the way that you carry yourself in that space. And you can still allow that relational piece to happen in how you engage in dialogue with each individual. Mm-hmm. The same is true in the corporate world, right? I can still be the CEO of the organization, and that holds certain responsibilities, and yet I can ensure that I am engaging with the organization so that we all feel that we are moving and rowing in the same direction together for the same purpose. Right? So it's a both and. I choose not to move through that space with the lever of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fear is never going to be as effective as an open, it's like the closed hand. It's the fist versus the open hand.
Yeah.
Right. And we get so much farther with the open hand. But I have to say, sometimes that's really tough when you are triggered by situations, even, situations which feel as if you're being backed into a corner, or you're attacked, or you're being judged, or, we all experience these, whether it's in the business world or in the classroom. And it can be really challenging to negotiate all of that. How do you help people to do that?
Well, so let go of the fact that you need to be perfect at this the entire time. I mean, that's the first thing, right? Is just, there are going to be things that are going to set you off. Mm-hmm. And so how do you unpack that at the appropriate time in the appropriate space? Right? Because real time may not be it. You may not be able to go, okay, pause, let me check in. What's happening for me? Where was the trigger? Is the trigger a real threat or not? How do I want to address it? Right? So being able to say, all right, so today I got triggered. What do I want to learn about that trigger? What was it about that interaction that really, honestly, at the heart of it was the trigger? Because most of the time it wasn't the individual in front of you. It was something that has happened in your past that has told you that's a threat. And so how do I now see it for what it is, which is a memory, and choose to engage differently? There are very few things that we can't walk back from. If we choose to engage, right? There's more power in going back to that person and saying, listen, I want to thank you for the dialogue we had the other day. And I want to acknowledge, here's what happened for me. Right? And it had nothing to do with you. Right? But here's what happened for me, and here's why you saw the reaction you did. And here's how I'd like to move forward differently.
Can you maybe walk us through a fun example of this in action?
A fun example?
Well, I say that I say that because I don't want it to be too personal, but just anecdotally, it feels like we're talking about it theoretically, but it would be better to have an example.
Okay. All right. An example. So I will give you an example, a personal example. Right? This is part of the transformative learning journey, is being able to actually share and move through some of your own experiences in service of others. So for me, in the dissertation process, there is something called the comprehensive exam, right, which is the culmination of your learning up to that point so that you can demonstrate to a board of academics that you are ready to begin doing your research. See, this is where you move from being a PhD student to being a PhD candidate. And in this process, there is a verbal exam, right? So where you send in some paper that you've written, and you then talk through it and take questions on it. I speak publicly for a living. This is what I do. So theoretically, that should have been the easiest part of the entire thing. Except what happened to me walking into that space is that I was triggered by noise I had heard before I began the program about the fact that I didn't deserve to be in the program. So I already walked in with a chip on my shoulder. Right? And so any and every question that they asked me got colored through that lens, that they were looking for reasons not to pass me, whether that was true or not. And my responses came from that place. Mm. Right? So everything that I had done, all of my knowledge about that paper that I had written, all of the research became muddied in my fear. Mm. Right? And it was literally in sitting and unpacking the what happened with my chair that I was able to start recognizing the fact that I had done that. Mm-hmm. Right? There was nothing in any of the questions they had asked that would have led them to believe that I wasn't ready. And in fact, they wouldn't have had me in the room if they didn't think I was ready. Right? But that was my story that got in my way. And real time, like, my poor chair was sitting in the corner watching this train wreck in slow motion, and there was nothing he could do about it. Wow. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they're not allowed to speak in the room. Oh. Mm-hmm. Right? But we were able to sit and unpack this, and you know, it really started with, okay, so what do you think happened? And it was in that one question, what do you think happened, that the flood came out. And he said, okay, look at this. Right? Let's really look at this. And how do we want to move forward differently? And so through that dialogue, he and I were able to craft a communication to the dissertation committee. Now, mind you, I later found out they were going to pass me anyway, despite what I thought was a really horrible performance. But I was able to actually change my footing, right? Mm-hmm. And change my relationship to them and to the process and to how I saw myself going forward.
Yeah, that is, and you've helped me work through similar things, and I think I've shared with you before, and I've talked about how in my own process, I came on the day of my dissertation defense, I came to this point of realizing I had made the entire process painful for myself. Yeah. And I was the one that had done it. I didn't enjoy it at all. And in this moment of sitting there at the culmination of the end of it, I realized I could have enjoyed it. I could have, if yes. I had allowed myself. It's part of this whole conversation that we're having about limiting beliefs. And it was the awareness in that moment that I had created my own suffering for all of these years that I was working on it. And I think it honestly, Lisa, was a belief that if I didn't suffer, it really wasn't worth anything.
Wow. Right? And how liberating is it to understand that and mm-hmm. to choose differently? Mm-hmm. Right? This is, I think, so two things that I want to really point out in that. Right? So many people never pause and recognize the fact that I'm the one doing this. Right? We look at the world around us and assume that this is the experience we're meant to have. And it's so sad, because it isn't. This is our one rodeo, and we get to choose how we ride it. There are circumstances. I'm not saying, okay, so you can choose tomorrow to be a billionaire and stop working, but you can choose how you experience what's happening around you. Right? You and I can both have the same exact, we can both go see the same exact movie. And we can walk out and have a completely different experience of that movie. The second piece that I think is so important in that is that you, in that moment, could make a different choice. Right? I don't have to be miserable about this. I don't have to be miserable about writing the book that came from the PhD. I can be joyful. And it's okay to be joyful. Go figure.
That's exactly right. And I think so much of those limiting beliefs are that if I didn't suffer, it wasn't worth anything. But I think that it was required. Like, in order to reach this certain whatever level that I thought in my mind I was at a PhD, to receive this doctorate, if it wasn't painful, it meant that I had just, I didn't deserve it. Like, maybe somehow I don't know, there was something tied up in all of that for me, that it had to be a painful process. But I have to say that is not only just in my head. These programs do sort of perpetuate the idea that it's going to be painful, and that it needs to be painful for everybody.
Absolutely. Right. At one point I heard a faculty member say, "We do it this way because this is what was done to us." And I went, "Did you enjoy the experience? Did it help you?" We were actually talking about the timed exam. So there was a component of the comprehensive exam that is, you are given a publication, and you have X number of minutes to read it and to critique it. And I said, this doesn't replicate the real world. Right? At no time are you going to be told you have 30 minutes to review and critique an article as a faculty member. It just doesn't happen. Like, you may be asked to review an article for sure, right? But it's not time. So why do we do this? Well, because that's what was done to us. And I said, so why perpetuate it? Right? And so you're right. I mean, you look at the research that's done on doctoral students, depression, dropping out, those folks who make it to all but dissertation. And so you are given these facts, you're given this stage on which to perform when you enter the program. Right? Not all of you will actually make it to your graduation. Blah, blah, blah.
There's the fear, right? Here comes the fear.
Right. And it's a data-based fear. Right? But the reality of it is, it's because we continue to push that on folks. It's the same thing that you talked about at the beginning of this call, which is, the leader who has to do it alone. Right? So we hear these stories of these self-made people. That's a version. Is it the only version? Is it the best version? Is it the version that we would choose? Not necessarily. And it's only the person who's actually willing to take a step back and say, does that actually need to be my experience? Who can choose a different path.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about the transformative teaching work that you're doing, is that it is opening a space that says we can choose differently. We can choose to teach differently and learn differently, and it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be torture. We don't have to earn it through, suffering. But there will be suffering, and we can learn from it, and we can have a supportive community to help us through it.
And that That is the key, right? So I can choose differently. And if I choose differently and don't have a support structure around me, then when those headwinds come, it's going to be that much harder for me to stay the course. And the headwinds will come because you've chosen to behave differently than folks expect.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the you're not suffering enough, Angelina. Clearly we're doing this wrong because you're not suffering enough, will lead to them trying, potentially, whether consciously or not, trying to find ways to ensure that you're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
and
I think that you've helped me a lot to see how that shows up in my, even now in my professional life. Yeah. Right? Then that pattern starts to show up over and over and over again. And I'm sure you see that with clients on a regular basis.
For all of us, this is true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the ability to see the pattern and to see it more quickly. So the way I talk about it is we have this set of behaviors that over time has become instilled in us, right? So we are operating on a model that we're not even aware because we've done it so often. It's like the drive to work. Right? When you take the same route to work every single day, you arrive at the parking lot and go, wait, how did I get here? Same thing for the beliefs we have running in our head.
Mm-hmm.
It's the interrupt that says, oh, wait, there's construction. There's an accident. I need to take a different route. Now I'm not really sure where I'm going. Right? So I've got to slow down and I've got to be conscious of each of the next moves. And that's how we build a different path. Right? That's how we interrupt those thoughts that go right down the rabbit hole and start to build a different set of thoughts and beliefs that will support who we're becoming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking about you started this, first of all, talking about the teacher that was so impactful, but also the story you were telling yourself about your own writing and your inability to write at the academic level. And I think, good writing, if I dare say good writing really takes us on a journey.
Yeah.
A personal journey where we learn so much about ourselves. And so in the course of writing this and confronting that fear and working through that process and having to be aware and take the detours through the process, what have you learned about yourself through this whole journey of writing so far?
Thank you for saying so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
it's going to continue.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Right. And I think the biggest learning I have for myself is the impact that my writing has on others. Right? So when people say to me, you're such a good writer, right? I don't hear that from the lens of it's a reinforcement of the counter belief to I'm not a good writer, because I'm no longer looking for those accolades. I'm not looking for that reward. What I'm looking for is the fact that the way I wrote actually had an impact on you as a reader. Right? And so for me, that's the biggest learning, is that my writing can have that impact. Mm-hmm. Is it going to have that impact on everyone? No. Are there people who think that my writing isn't good? I'm sure that there are plenty of people who think that my writing isn't good. And that's okay. Right? It's not good for them. They don't resonate with it in this moment, and they may never resonate with it. And that's okay. It's not meant for them.
I enjoy your blogs because they're they're concise and they have a nice rhythm to them, and you just kind of go in like a laser. So I really always appreciate that. It's like, here we are, this is what we're doing, and it takes you, it gives you these small bites, very rich bites. So I appreciate those blogs. I would ask you then, so you've completed this lengthy process, the dissertation process. We got through that as a group of women in the writers group. We all ended up completing our PhDs. That was such a miracle. And now we can't even celebrate as a group because of the situation. But one day, there will be a big party. So now what? Now what with that work? How does that work move from that container that you had to really explore and expand yourself in a way that you perhaps didn't expect and perhaps were resistant to in the beginning? And now how do you see it? How do you envision it moving forward into the book that you're going to write based on your research?
So the book is really, it's a story for the person who endeavors to be a transformative teacher. So done well, done the way I would want it to be done, it's a dialogue where the reader actually feels like I'm sitting next to them, having a conversation, sharing with them the stories, helping them see the possibility, also helping them see the potential implications of this, right? You talked about it before. There is risk, there is fear, there is vulnerability. I'm not going to gloss over any of that because it is all true. Mm-hmm. And you have a choice in it. Mm-hmm. So this book is really meant to be a companion to the individual who wants to be a transformative teacher.
But probably not a guide, right? It's not going to be like 5 easy steps to be a transformative teacher, because I find that to be like, I'm not sure. I know that I am a transformative educator, but that is only because, Lisa, that I'm a person on the journey, and it can't help but come through in everything that I do. So I don't know how to do that in the reverse. You know, it's like, I think I just can't help myself, but I don't know that I set out to do that. I do try to hold spaces for students to sort of explore themselves and maybe give them some situations that challenge their beliefs and help them to grow. But I don't, I have to say, I didn't set out thinking, but this is because I'm going to be a transformative teacher.
Absolutely. Well said. Right. I don't think, first of all, I don't even think that language is available to teachers. I think that right now it's just a matter of, you've got a curriculum and you need to get through it, and there's a grading rubric and you need to make sure that grading rubric will work. And so what I'm trying to do is offer them here within the construct that is, how can you choose to be different? Right. And there may be pieces within the book that when we go back to the example you had about I'm teaching the same way to the same class 2 times in a row, there may be pieces of my book that help you understand what's happening in that second class differently.
That'd be great. Hurry up and write that, please. I need that chapter.
I'll send it to you to give me feedback on how's
that. That'll work. Absolutely. I could be a case study for that one right there.
But, and all joking aside, I think that that's one of the wonderful ways in which we've been here for each other, right? Is that I have no doubt that I can share with you any piece of the book as it's written, and you will give me good and honest and thorough feedback. Right? And that's a good friend.
Yeah.
Right? That's someone who's not saying, this isn't the way I would write it. You're saying, this is how it landed on me. And if that's what you wanted, fantastic. But just be aware this is how it landed on me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so often our roles in this circle is to hold the mirror for one another and help each other to see ourselves as we are and how we're being, how we are presenting ourselves, how we're being perceived, but also just being seen for who we really are, being seen and being appreciated for all that goes with that. So I think that one of the things I wanted to talk about is something that you mentioned in your writing, and then it's something that happens to us organically in our community of writers and in our work together as you're mentoring me, is the sharing of stories seems to be so powerful in this, growth process and in the transformative field where it's, actually working and functioning. And so would you talk a little bit about how you use stories and story making and sharing in your professional life to help people?
Absolutely. So whether it is teaching in the Emerging Leaders Program or working one-on-one with a coaching client, it's about the honoring of story. So I can use story to help elicit from the individuals listening to it a reaction, right? A perspective, a way of being that they may not have had before. So yesterday I had the honor of teaching in the Emerging Leaders Program, and we were talking about how do we engage with the resources that we need to support us on this journey. And I was talking about my tribe and who they are and how they've helped me move along my path. Right? And so that was my ability to share a story with them that helped them actually see a way of being with a group of people that are on journey to support the individual in where they want to go. Right? Because for many of these rising leaders, they believe that there is a preordained path that someone in some high-ranking office has said, you will do this, and when you get proficient at this, your next step will be this, and your next step will be this. And they've gotten to a point in their career where they're saying, I'm not sure that that's my ladder. Right? I'm not sure that that's the mountain I want to be climbing. And so the exercises that I had them doing yesterday were really about taking a step back and thinking about what is their journey? And how do they start becoming the author, the protagonist of that? And who do they need around them to help them begin to make that shift? Right? I'm not saying quit your job tomorrow and start something else, but I'm saying if the something else is where your passion lies, why are you thinking that you need to wait until you've retired? Right? Because there's no given that that's going to happen before you start enjoying your life.
Oh, that's such a powerful moment to be at, and to also to bear witness to and to support people through. But it's also really scary, Lisa, to think, here I've gone down this path all this time, and now I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, I don't really think this is what I want, or I don't really think this is for me. And that is such a crisis point when everything starts to fall away. How do you help people in that moment?
Right, so it is wrapping your arms around them. It is creating the container that says, what a freaking gift. What a gift for you to see this. Rather than plodding along for the next 15 years and not understanding why you're not happy. Right? Why your blood pressure is going up. Why you have insomnia. Why you have anxiety. Right? These are all manifestations of the fact that you are not on your journey. And so how do we create a plan, a roadmap that has you moving from today toward where you want to go in a way that is safe and appropriate for you and your circumstances. Right? So if you're a mid-level manager with a young family and you are the primary breadwinner, those can be seen as handcuffs, right? Or they can be seen as a platform to build on. It's your choice. It's your choice. And so what are the conversations, just conversations, that you could begin to have today that would allow you to see other ways forward?
And how, Lisa, because I feel so fortunate I kind of feel as if I fell into this group that's so supportive of me, that it was almost serendipitous. But I remember times in my life when I felt so incredibly isolated and alone, and I didn't know how to find that support. So if folks are feeling like that, they don't know people like that, or they're afraid to even speak some of these things out loud for fear of all kinds of judgment, or just even, I have to say, the first time you start to come to terms and say these things to yourself is scary enough, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have those people around you, how do we begin to call them into our lives? How do we begin to find them?
So this isn't pithy by any means, but they're already there. Right? They are just waiting for the opportunity to engage in a different dialogue with you. I would never have known that I could have had some of the incredibly powerful conversations with you that I've had. It's just that when we're together, those are the conversations that happen. Right? And so it is understanding who you can trust, and it is building upon that trust. Right? So I am not advocating for walk up to a stranger and go, here's my life story, and I want no judgment, and I want some great sounding board effects. Brene Brown, I keep pointing to her, but she talks about the fact that not everyone deserves to hear your story. Because it is an honor to bear witness to another human being human. It's a powerful thing. Right? And so who is that one person? Start with one person that you can actually engage in a dialogue. And maybe it starts as a theoretical dialogue about what if. And build outward. Look at the people who have accomplished things that you would love to accomplish, and learn more about their story. Because in many cases, they started off not dissimilar from where you are now. And they may be willing to, at least for some period of time, be on journey with you.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I am more than blessed to have you on my journey with me. And I am so glad that we've had the time to have this conversation about transformation and transformative teaching and the book that you're working on. And I can't wait to see what's next and to apply that book in my classroom. So,
well, I got to tell you, my friend, I am just as honored to have you on journey with me. It has been life-changing.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm so glad we were together today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you. For more information about Dr. Lisa DeAngelis and Dragonfly Coaching, you can go to her website, www.dragonflycoachingllc.com. That's www.dragonflycoachingllc.com. And follow her on LinkedIn. Look for Lisa DeAngelis, DeAngelis. You have been listening to Interspace with Angelina Avedano. My heartfelt gratitude and appreciation goes to my husband, David Needs, Senior Production Engineer. If you would like to learn more about me or my work, look for me on Facebook and Instagram, Dr. A. Avedano with Cicada Personal Metamorphosis. That's Cicada with a Y, C-Y-C-A-D-A. Or you can email me at dr.aavedano@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This is Angelina reminding you that we're all connected.